This morning, I wanted to sum up or sort of review what we've been talking about over the past few days. We're definitely now in the full flow of whatever this is, and I hope the questions that you brought with you are being answered, or that you're forming new ones. The process of trying to figure out what it is, which is what this seems to be and what consciousness seems to be, is a process that has been gathering strength for a very, very long time. It appears that the tendency for systems to complexify and to multiply the connectedness within them is some kind of ontological characteristic that pervades not only organic existence, but pre-organic existence, even pre-molecular existence. The universe begins in some kind of singularity. I mean, this is the teaching of physics in all its forms, that the universe begins in some kind of singularity, which is not greatly different nor greatly easier to imagine than simply that God made everything. It is essentially that statement, clothed in mathematics and abstraction. What is unexamined in all these models that project the whole scheme, from the largest to the smallest, from the earliest to the most recent, is an awareness that apparently the describing apparatus is unable to emerge from itself, that everything is somehow self-description. And it's interesting that self-similarity is this property that you encounter in the fractals, and then that you encounter in nature or complex phenomena once you examine them with the fractal idea. So what is this peculiar tension between individuality and the general case? After the lecture yesterday, we were talking about the phenomenon of elves that is experienced with some hallucinogens, and wondering if perhaps at last the fractals didn't bring into our ken the possibility of an explanation of what this is. That what it is that you perceive at last the fractal nature of yourself, so that you see that you are yourself, but you are also all these little selves, which Jung actually mentioned this in one essay. He called them autonomous psychic entities, mischievous bounding forms of ontic energy. And this is what it is, and this can be viewed as a kind of fragmentation if it overwhelms the coping ability. But on the other hand, it is a perception that is probably primary. I've noticed in my own encounters with elves that they have a curious relationship to my own body image, in that they can jump in and out of your body. They are autonomous psychic entities, but also autonomous linguistic entities. The fact that they seem to be made of a material which is made more of meaning than light, in other words, that they carry their meaning on their surface, is indicative of the fact that they are made of the material of the self, if you want to think of it that way. In other words, that they are as ontologically primary as you, the perceiver. Well, if you once in that extremely altered state, you have touched this notion of the fractal nature of the self, then you bring it back and you see it all around you. I mean, for instance, ourselves as social creatures. I am myself. I could be someone else, you, and likewise you could be anybody. Our individuality is a uniquely felt thing, but few people would argue that someone looking down from a flying saucer would probably see us as interchangeable, the way we see ants as interchangeable. The ants are a fractal example of an animal population because all ants appear more or less alike, and all ant societies of the same species appear more or less alike. Yet from the point of view of the monad, at any level in the modular hierarchy, there is a unique perspective and a unique centering process which creates an individuality, a point of view, a self, which is sustained in time. But then when you turn toward this temporal dimension, which the self is sustained in, you discover what I mentioned in another context yesterday, that time also has this fractal quality. 1 minute is rather like another, 1 day is rather like another, 1 year is rather like another, and yet each day, each moment, each year is different. And so there is this strange tension between the self-similitude of temporal flow and also the differentiation in it. But what emerges slowly out of this is the perception that all of these flows, all of these fractals, all of these self-similar processes are embedded in similar, naturally, fractal processes at higher and higher levels of expression in space and in time, so that the universe in its entirety, from Big Bang to heat death or recollapse into another super black hole state, is a kind of tone or a kind of waveform, which is then reiterated on many levels of duration, which are successively smaller and smaller and fall away from the pattern of the primary waveform. And so when you look at the history of the universe on a vast scale, what you see is an initial state of great indeterminacy, an inchoate state of such high energy that everything is just flying to pieces. There is no bonding energy that can overcome the kinetic energy of the system. Then as time passes and temperatures fall, eventually nuclear chemistry is possible. Electrons settle down into orbits around the nucleus of the nuclei of atoms. Then, at a still much later point in time, the temperature in the universe in certain areas has fallen to, and the stars have cooked out a more complex species of molecules, carbon, and suddenly very complex structures can arise. And this tendency toward complexification, which describes the history of the entire universe, also describes the history of the 20th century, your life, the past 6 months. All of these processes have this tendency to go toward an end point of extreme complexity. And this has not, it's obvious, and it's part of our literature and our art. This is why the apocalyptic and millenarian tendency is built into the Western religious tradition. This is, I believe, the yearning which Western religion satisfies in people that is not satisfied by science. In other words, that Western religion sanctifies death as some kind of